Hi everybody, I'm Niels, I'm the producer for All Will Rise, and welcome to this, developers play All Will Rise during Steam Next Fest. And I'm accompanied by Joost today. Joost, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Joost. I am the Impact Director for All Will Rise, and I'm an Associate Professor of Transformative Imagination at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Niels, I think we are continuing your Let's Play from last time, right? So
Yes.
we're here in the middle of the game. Can you tell us a little bit about what has happened so far?
Yeah, that's fine. I will. Actually, we started this playthrough on Monday with Marocha and Magna, our UI and art director, and our narrative director, and then we played through the opening court case of All Will Rise. All Will Rise is a game where you take a billionaire to court for destroying the planet, but the opening court case is about um, giving personhood rights to a river, which you win, have a landslide victory for. And then after that, yesterday I played with Hugo, our design director and programmer. We talked a lot more about the card battle design. So we went into a card battle with Kotovai, the eco-terrorist priest. There will be videos of all of this online on YouTube, which we will share through our socials. So if you're interested, you can look them up. So we've had our first few battles. We've had team members almost burn out, and now we're in the sort of second week of our game, and the goal is that we need to try and find more evidence to support our final court case to prove that the river is actually murdered, and that how the community is devastated by this. So yeah.
Nice. Nice, yeah, and we thought that today, while we're playing, it would be nice to talk a bit about the production process of All Will Rise, Niels, because you are the game's producer. And do you want to maybe say something about the experience you're bringing from production, from your past game experiences to this game, and how does that it informs your thinking about producing All Will Rise?
Yeah. So maybe good for people to know. So I've been in both indie games and in AAA production before. I was the owner of a indie studio here in the Netherlands, Weird Beard Games. We made Tricky Towers, sort of Tetris meets Jenga party game. People may know it. And then I switched to AAA. I worked at Guerrilla Games on Horizon Forbidden West. I was the producer for the robots and the combats and the gameplay system. Two very different types of things. Like on the AAA side, it's like hundreds of people, and on the indie side, it was a small team of like 6 people. So the role is very different. And now we're with a team of around 10 people for All Will Rise, and that's also again really different because we're all freelancers, globally very distributed. So a lot of people got used to that, I think, in Corona times, but now most people want to go back to the office, but we still do the remote work. And I think what is really fun about this specific team is that I get to work with people who are all super invested in the goal. I think that's what's so great about this project. It's the vision that we share, even though it's not even really written down. We have a very clear shared vision of the end goal of this product, and that really helps pushing everything forward and making decisions very easily. Also work with a lot of experienced devs. So when we discuss, basically we meet every Thursday. We have a team meeting. Then we just go through everything. So the game's development, but also the community building, what events we should go to, everything. Discussions about politics, whatever, and that sort of helps us be together. Like because we're so remote, it's nice for everybody to see each other. Also for other people in the team, they're not necessarily always have something to say to each other, but it's nice to be involved in that sense.
Yeah.
So that for me is always one of the most important things. First, as a producer, is to actually make sure that there's a team and that the team works together really well. And I think we've achieved that. I'm super proud of that. That even though we're so remote, that everybody feels very attached to each other. So that's one of the most important things to do. And then next to that, of course, we have all these meetings with like one-on-ones or 3 people that dive into a specific thing that they need to talk about.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, maybe we can you can play a little bit, Niels, while I continue to sort of like ask you some questions about all of this, and people can just see the game a bit, but we can talk about the production more because I'm really interested in. I'm very impressed by the team and by your production of the game and the way that we are able to keep on task. I think we have the benefit of having a pretty clear vision for the game in general, which has helped,
Yeah.
and not a lot of disagreements about that, which I think is also key. But yeah, it's an interesting process, and I wonder if you have some perspective on how to sort of keep that. Because it's sort of we have to keep the focus, we have to keep the game designable. It has to be on focus in terms of tone, in terms of gameplay, in terms of all the roles in the team and so on. It's a lot of sides to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the things that's what I try to do. I'm not a very strict producer, so we don't have like super targeted sprints of like 2 weeks or 4 weeks. We're moving towards that more now that we're getting further in development, but we had a very long search for what the actual gameplay should be. And then I think you, as a producer, you should let the team go and be quite free in what they do. But what I did always try to steer towards is that we, and what really helped is that we always were working on another build, another demo for publishers or for an event or for an online showcase. And so there's always first a few weeks, it goes a bit in waves where we go very broad and we explore and we try out new mechanics. And if you look back at the chat I had with Hugo yesterday, it's like, oh, now let's completely overhaul the card game and everything. So you go quite wild and broad, and then you get closer to a sort of sub-release, and then we start focusing again. So then it's really, okay, now let's bring this all together and make it playable, like really, really playable. So because the proof is in the playing, in that sense. So then we sometimes polish it maybe a bit too far and waste a bit of time there, but at least we really, really go into the narrative. Does it work? Do the gameplay rules work? Does the UI, do people understand what they have to do? So we can really have a demo that we can show to a crowd. And that also, of course, was important to keep building our audience, pitch to publishers, because then you can, with a game like this, if you make a game that's really a, I'm going to make a roguelike whatever, people just know what you're making, so they immediately understand what you're doing. So you can get away with like, well, this is a roguelike, but it's going to focus really on the graphics. Okay, then you have to show off the graphics, and the rest they can fill in their head. But for this game, because the mechanics are so new, it's really hard for people to grasp that. So you have to make it look good and make it feel good, and have the design work really well. So, and then after we had such a demo again, we would then take all the learnings from that and go broad again. And we've been going up and down, but the waves have starting to become smaller, and the content starts to become more. And so iterations, like big changes, are starting to become more expensive as well, because we have more content. So what we did for the demo that we have now is really work on the first few hours of the game. Although there's already much more after that people don't get to see. The whole court case at the end of the game is also partially there, but that looks way more horrible. There's no nice writing. It's mechanically there. We know in like large we know roughly what we want to say there, but it's not nicely written dialogue yet or anything. So that's what we're going to do now after this demo, is actually focus on creating all the content after stubbing out every mission, every card game, like which cards am I going to get with which mission, etc. So we have all of that first stubbed, and then we can check it mechanically. We can also see like how big is this game going to be, is that realistic, etc. Maybe remove some things there. Actually, before that, we're going to do one more sprint to actually do a bit of an update of the tooling to make it easier for Magna and Hugo to manage all the content with some lessons learned from this previous sprint. So it is in that sense very traditionally agile in a way, in agile development. Like we work towards a build and then we take the lessons learned and we work on the most important stuff that we have to then. But there's always the I think all game developers have that, like there's the shiny new thing and like, oh, we could also do this, we could also do that, but you also have to steer everyone into the direction of okay, we have to finish a product as well. And I think that's, for me as a executive producer role, the hardest thing. Like, when am I going to listen to the team and say, okay, we're going to go wild again and make it better? And when do I say, no, now we're going to keep it like this, and now we're going to move on because we also have to ship this thing and we can't like burn money forever. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do, and you have to base that on of course what you get from players, from knowing your team and knowing when they're going on a wild tangent and when they really make a strong case for something, and trusting your own guts. So that's something's a wild thing to do. And
this is not an easy job for you, because you have a team of people who all have different levels of experience. They're all senior in different ways, right?
Yeah.
And but I think most of us tend to sort of like be that sort of where we are more like, let's add this or let's add this. Like, I think that's a little bit the tendency of the most of the team. Although, I mean, I don't want to sort of, I mean, I think we are all also, able to focus and so on. But I think there's a lot of good ideas, and you having to sort of like make those cuts and make those decisions is not easy, I think.
No, it's not easy, but I think, because we have that wave, like, okay, now we're going to go wild and now we're going to go focus. Everybody understands that and feels that, and then everybody's on board with that. So everybody knows, like, oh, this is a sprint. Let's call it that. Some producers would butcher me for calling this a sprint, but this is a period of time where we focus in delivering, and this is a period of time where we can experiment and go wild a bit. So yeah, I think that's for me what makes it really, really interesting.
Yeah. What is the hardest thing about it for you?
Well, so maybe not the hardest thing, but what we have had during this development, which is very different if you have a big studio, is we've had some people get sick or things like that, and sometimes other people's work really depends on somebody else their work. And if you have a very big team, like in a AAA studio, you have like 40 artists or 10 writers or whatever. So when one of the or 50 programmers or whatever, if one gets sick, then you can divide their work over the other people. For us, like, there's one programmer designer, there's one narrative director, writer, there's one UI person, there's one artist at the moment. So when that entire discipline is gone for a while, so then you have to sort of work around that and that's not that makes it somewhat that can be a challenge in a
Yeah.
way. Um,
Yeah, it throws all your planning sort of into disarray, right? Yeah.
But what's nice for in comparison then again with AAA games, you have to imagine if you work with 500 people for 5 years on something. If you're idling for a month, you have 500 people idling for a month. So what tends to happen with these huge AAA games, and that's why I think a lot of people complain that they can't be innovative. I think they are innovative, but they have to be really fast about it. So they have like a few months to just say this is what the game's going to be, and now we're going to execute. And you can't say like 2 years in, like, oh no, I'm gonna change this mechanic completely. No, because like world builders and writers have been using this in their level design already, or it has been described in some text. So you can't just pull something out that you've promised in the beginning. Now you have to deliver. So, and with such a small team like this, and I think that goes for all indie games, yeah, you can say, okay, we're going to do 180 pivot, and we get everybody in a room. Like that works because if we are all in a room, we're with 10 people, and if you with a AAA studio, even when you get all the team leads in a room, there's already like 50 or 80 people maybe, so it's impossible to discuss something like that. So it really has to funnel through direction then and then back, and those processes are way harder there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, interesting. And maybe what was it like to sort of work on this? Like we are in a really great stage now. And by the way, I see some people in the who are watching. Just drop your questions in the chat about producing a game like this and developing it, because I think it's a really interesting discussion. A friend of mine told me last week. He said you should write a book about this experience, which I thought was an interesting idea. But we are now at a stage where the game. All Will Rise is people are playing it, people are loving it, lots of great feedback is coming back, and the art style is cohesive, and the gameplay is really there, and it's deep, and so on. So we're at this really great place now where we sort of feel like we have something good in our hands. Yeah. People like it, people are supporting it, people are funding our Kickstarter, which is really wonderful. But of course, it wasn't always like this, and so. Can you describe a bit what it's like to be in that stage where you don't know if this is going to go anywhere,
Yeah.
If you have any thoughts about that?
I'm going to have two thoughts about this. So the early process and the where we are now. Because now I would love to describe our game as a diamond in the rough, and I will get to that in a second. But in the beginning of such a game, it's all fun, and for most developers, it's just like, yeah, I can go wild and blah, 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 blah. But as a producer, you are always in your head like, we have to deliver the game. What's it going to be? Right. So sometimes you're a bit too pushy in like having people make something. Well, actually, in the beginning, you should let them really go wild and experiment. And I have to, for me, that's a real challenge, to sit on my hands, and you have the feeling that there's no progress, and that we're taking a step back and a step back and a step forward. Oh, finally a step forward, and oh no, 2 steps back. And but what helps there, the way you can I don't believe in very strict sprints and deliverables and anything at the beginning of a game. You should just let the developers play around with like, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to make it, and then play it and test it and discuss that. And then, because if you're going to say, well, we're going to focus on this for the next 2 weeks, this is going to be the sprint, that works if you already know what you're going to make. But if you are making something like what we're doing, we have this vision of it's a game about activism and about helping people find their way to do something in this world for good. That's a very wild thing. So, Shintu's boring. Sorry, I'm not really paying attention to the playing, so I burned out Shintu. That's what happens if you don't pay attention to your team. Yes. Can I make him do something? Yeah, I can send him on a Heartsea mission. Whereas and maybe I should actually send Joy on a gutsy mission because she's losing her heart, and we're going to meet Shabir in the meanwhile. So what helps is having that vision, and allowing for just be there with the team very regularly and just see, okay, this didn't work, now immediately do something else. Like let's just try that out. So it's a lot of talking and just being there and making sure that what we do is at least, and you can sometimes say, well, do we have to do all this, or could we prototype something like this way more easy? Like, is there a quicker way to do this? So that's at that point. What the hardest thing right now is that I feel we have something good. We see that from all the playtest feedback that people really enjoy what they have, and I've seen this happen with a lot of inexperienced indie teams, like people just out of school or something like that. They also feel like, oh wow, my game is great, I'm going to finish it and put it on the store, and then nothing happens. Right. Because you have that 7 out of a 7 game. Because what happens if your game is not finished yet and you put it in front of people, it's really hard to do a playtest with people and then that they are really honest with what happens. They're always going to be nice to you, and often you ask your friends and people like that, and even if you ask people like, no, be very direct with me, they will still be nice, and you're asking them to play, so they will dedicate like half an hour or an hour of time. But if your first 2 minutes suck, they will continue. But other people, there's like thousands of games out there. If they don't like your first 2 minutes, they will just say nah and just stop playing. So and sometimes actually more scary if you feel you have something good, because then you should be wary not to stop making it way better. I saw it as well. So when I work in Tricky Towers, there's a trap there as well. Tricky Towers, so that's a local multiplayer party game, and local multiplayer games do great at events, because on an event there's people, they are having fun, and then they can play competitively with friends, and they're gonna have fun. So you feel like, oh wow, I have something brilliant. But even if you give them the most stupid game they could play, they will have fun. So that's it's not the best test case in that sense for your game. Whereas for a narrative game like this, you at an event, a lot of people will drop it after like a few minutes and walk away. Like we had some exceptions there, so I'm super happy about that. But narrative games tend to do horribly at events, because nobody, like in these crowded rooms, has the energy to focus and sit for an hour and really dive into your very narratively, mechanically tough game. So
and it's interesting because I feel like with All Will Rise we've had a vision for this game, and I think especially once the focus sort of like city became Muziris and Kerala, I think the vibe and the sort of the tone and the sort of the sense that we wanted a strategically deep game and narratively deep, and lots of options and opportunities to go to different places, that came together at some point. I mean, we had this sort of like turn towards more in-depth play and the card deck building and so on. But since then, I think that sort of vision of what the game's flavor should be like, what the game's sort of gameplay should be like in general and so on, has been quite consistently there, and then it's just a matter of finding out how to actually do it, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard, of course, but having that sort of clarity of vision, I think, has been very helpful.
So for people who are watching, we're actually playing Shabir now. Shabir is a fisherman who tends to have really good gossip. And what we need to do is we need to get oil spill active on board. Well, that worked out, and we have to max out one of Shabir's emotions. So mine's hearts or guts, I don't have the best cards at the moment, so I'm gonna just swap cards. It's gonna cost me a turn, but well, who knows? We get something better in the next round. Yes, there we go. Trial for murder. Let's see if we can get him on board with that. Bam! Now he's close to being maxed out. I think Shabir is a really interesting character.
Yeah, definitely. Shabir is starting to make more sense. His conspiracy theories are making more sense as more things are revealed about real world situations,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Greedy feels the same, right? Which
Yeah.
is very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Shabir has been in our game, well, quite from the start already as an
yeah,
idea. He's
yeah,
like used to be the first encounter you would have as a bit of an
yeah,
introductory character that's been swapped around with the current demo. But he was always a bit of a conspiracy theorist. And you can get him as a witness. You can, well, I won't spoil too many things about Shabir. But what's really interesting there, like, if you use him as a witness in your final trial, you have to make sure he doesn't go too much overboard in some of his emotions, because then he will start talking conspiracy theories, and that will actually harm your case. So you have to really get to know all the people, and when you put them on the stand as a witness, it's important that you also know how they can be pushed in the wrong way. But, yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a sidestep, but I also wanted to let people know a bit about the, the game.
totally, no,
Yeah,
totally, and I think Shabir is a really interesting character. Who I mean, when we it's really interesting to see the evolution of the conversation with Shabir, because the first sort of incarnation of that was Shabir wasn't really willing to talk to you, and was mostly talking about his kids, right,
yeah,
as a way to sort of distract from having a real conversation about pretty dramatic things, and it was really funny. But it was a bit of a difficult first conversation for players to get the game right. So now sort of like skipping ahead to where we are now, there's a lot more possible in that conversation. It's much more about the issues of the game, and this sort of everything that's going on in Mesiris, which makes it much richer and also much more sort of appropriate, I guess.
yeah.
I guess conversation.
It was indeed what you're saying was, it was really like we had this thought about, like, oh, it's really funny that he's trying to avoid the conversation, and you're trying to have a conversation with him, which is a great thing in itself. But as a first conversation to have in a game, people think, then they feel like they're doing it wrong. They don't understand what they have to do, and it's actually, they're not doing it wrong. He's just being an asshole. Um, and I think that's something we've learned. Like, you have to, in a game, you have to first handhold people a bit, so they feel they're doing good at the game, and then very slowly increase difficulty. I think that's a trap for a lot of game developers, that you've been. I've seen it with so many games that I've worked on as well, but also with other games, that people make these super complex systems, and there's an audience for that, definitely. But the bigger audience, like I said before, there's so many games out there. So if they don't get it and they feel stupid in the beginning, they're like, oh, this is not for me. Well, maybe that game is actually very much for them. But you as a developer, you've been interacting with these systems for like hours, so you know exactly what to do. So for you, it's all like, oh, this is super easy. But for someone who doesn't know about your game, they don't know what the goal is, they don't know what the rules are, they don't know what the setting is, they don't even know who the characters are. So they have to take so much in. So you really have to give them time for that. And that comes through playtesting, and really listening then to those playtesters. If they say, I don't get it, they're not dumb or they're not stupid. It's like they're not playing it wrong. It's really
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's an interesting balance, right? Accessibility versus depth and so on. Like, an interesting challenge to sort of work on. Yeah, really nice. how do you feel about making a game in a time when the competition for attention on games and on all media is intense, right? I was listening to Triple Click, the games podcast that we've been in contact with a little bit, and they were talking about how I think the CEO of Netflix, I believe it was, said that this is the most competitive time ever, in the history of media in terms of attention. And if you don't feel constantly extremely worried about that, then you're not paying attention, or you're not awake to the situation, even as in Netflix, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, because of course you have experience both in indie and in AAA around sort of around how to how to make people see the game, understand what it is, connect to it, and so on, when there's so much else out there, right? I mean, I know with the Horizon games, there was always like, Horizon Zero Dawn was at the same time as Breath of the Wild, right? And then Forbidden West was at the same time as Elden Ring, and both those games still did super well, regardless, right? But and of course you've had your indie success as well. So yeah, it's an interesting time to make games, right? There's so many good games out there. Like I still haven't touched Hades 2, and I stopped playing Silksong because I'm not extremely good at Silksong, and it just takes me forever to beat that damn game, and I'm not playing. If I keep playing it, I don't play anything else. So now I'm playing Clair Obscur because I'm like, okay, I want to know what the fuss is with that game. It's not. And I'm struggling a little bit to gel with the systems there, because there's the parry system, anyway. And then Hades 2, I don't even play. Well, Hades 1 is one of my favorite games of all time, and I haven't touched Hades 2. That's crazy. That's a crazy time to live in. There's so much good stuff out there, right?
First thing, I think it's going to get way worse. Because
Oh
the problem is, like, I don't want to go into this for too long, but with the whole generative AI stuff, I don't believe that it will be good games that people are going to make, but people are going to use more and more generative AI to also make games, and it's going to flood the stores even more.
Yeah.
One hopeful thought I try to have there is maybe the stores will just die because people can't find anything good anymore, and everything is redone. I don't know, and maybe all these AI firms go bankrupt because actually they can't fund the cost of all the energy that's needed to generate all this stuff. But I mean, they're turning a loss, all of them at the moment. So but that's a very different discussion to have, because the question you're asking, like, it's a discoverability problem, and that's has always been the problem, but it's changed, and it's getting harder nowadays. Like, it used to be like, oh, you have to find the right people and then get a publisher, and if you had a publisher, you were like golden because they had the context with the stores and everything, and that would be fine. And then there was the whole indie boom, and then it was the, like, if you find a streamer that will put content out about you, then you're golden. Or if you secure spots on some big online showcase, that were all the things. But now a streamer, like, if you send it to a streamer, they almost auto direct you with, like, well, for 5 minutes pay so many €1,000 to be on my stream. And I get that, like, they also have to make money, and everybody is competing for attention. The hopeful thing, I think, still is that, especially with the AI generated, and that was also already happening when, like, tools got better a lot. It became much easier for people, like with Unity appearing.
Right.
It became much easier for people to make games themselves. So you saw an influx of games as well. But the actually really excellent games, that's still a small portion of what's out there. So that's a little bit of hope there. But yeah, you just have to try everything to get attention for your game. But I think it's almost impossible to market a bad game. If your game sucks, you can do all the marketing you want, but then when people actually play it, they will hate it. that doesn't mean just make a good game and you're gonna be there. No, not at all. It's really much harder, and you just have to try all the avenues to get there. Funding has, like, it's not impossible, but it has become much harder because for publishers, it's sort of a buyer's market now. It's for them way easier to say, well, oh, I got these 200 pitches and this game is almost finished and already has like 50k wishlisters and a huge social media. Like, why wouldn't they publish that game if those people want them to publish it? I would be like, if you already have that amount of success, why would you want the publisher still? Because apparently you were already able to create the followers, and you already have the wishlisters. Maybe actually go to the bank and lend the money there, because that publisher is going to take like after the platform holder another 20-30% of your income. So maybe it's actually not so wise to work with the publisher, but that's also a whole other discussion to go on. But yeah, so like we are also finding it hard to get more attention for the game, but you do notice with every iteration we do, like first you reach out to indeed the publishers, and if that doesn't work, you go on the socials more, you go on online showcases, you go on real life showcases, Steam Next Fest, start a Kickstarter, which for us the Kickstarter is that we're doing. So for everybody who's watching, please support our Kickstarter. We set the goal very low because we know we're going to finish this game, but there's like the minimal viable product that we would be able to release ourselves, and the more money we get, the more awesome we can make this game and the bigger chance of success we have afterwards as well. But the whole Kickstarter is sort of like mini release in a way, because we have this public demo out, so we can already see again, like, okay, this is what would happen if we release the game now with this amount of following. So now how can we create our like a bigger following and hopefully a bigger success. So it's a sort of dry run for the release, basically.
Yeah, that's been a really interesting experience, right? It's sort of creating this very concentrated, very intense period of really sort of like finding ways to have people see what's going on and connect to it, right?
Yeah,
it's an interesting, and it's important. I mean, I know that there's a desire sometimes maybe to postpone these things, right? And to say, okay, maybe we need a bit more time before we launch and so on. But ultimately, you need the pressure, I think, to get somewhere.
Yeah, we've postponed the Kickstarter like twice already, and then everybody's saying you can only do a Kickstarter if you're more than 1,000 followers. And when we started, we had like 600. But at some point, you also have like, yeah, but we also have a demo now ready. There's the momentum internally that we have, and it's also going to be like, if you say to the team like, oh no, we're again not going to do it, that's going to tank morale as well at some point. And
that's interesting. Yeah,
you
exactly.
also think about that, like, and at some point you also have to think a bit like, okay, maybe this is the amount of success we can get, so then let's take that and try to like work with that budget then, and that's it's a business decision as well in that sense. Like, we know now roughly after this Kickstarter how much traction we have, and you can sort of try to extrapolate that to what your release success can be. So then you can say, okay, then we'll have to work within this budget. So for me, this is also all new, and I'm someone who really loves to do new things. So that's why, like I said, I had Weird Bit Games, where we started as a Flash development studio, just developing commercial games for like promotional games and serious games and stuff like that. And then Flash was scaled basically, and then we moved to Unity. Then made Tricky Towers, which was the first time we released a game on consoles, and then I've switched to AAA studio, and now I'm doing this completely other activist game in a remote setting with Kickstarter, and everything is new, but that keeps it interesting as well. Like, I know, like, some people say you should do one thing and get better at that. And I really want to do that as well, but I also think you also sometimes just get energy from doing new things as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and in a way you are doing one thing, you're producing, right? So you're learning, you follow sort of like your instincts and your experience on that is just applied to different
Yeah.
different projects,
Yeah.
yes, different type, and it's games, right? So you're staying in that space as well.
That's true. That's
Um,
true.
yeah, yeah. No, it's been really interesting because I feel like my role on the project, aside, when I describe sort of the role of being an impact director, I often say now, I've said that especially a lot in the last couple of weeks, that I'm trying to sort of like shepherd, I guess, and we're all doing that, but I guess that's sort of my assigned role a little bit, shepherd the capacity of the game to do some good in the world, right?
Yeah.
But that means that that I'm sort of really looking out for. That means that the game has to be very engaging, very fun, very interesting, right? Because I come from the sort of serious games world a little, at least partly. I've done a lot of other things, but I've seen enough of the serious games work, and I've developed some serious games before, which were specific educational projects or specific projects or policymakers or something, and I see, there's such a huge field out there of people who want to build games for a better world and so on that don't really understand video games, especially if they're making a video game. Obviously, is very relevant, but they don't understand what video games are about. They don't understand why people love video games, right?
No.
And it's just gonna fail, right? It's just not gonna. They don't have any. It's like being a musician and having no idea of what great music sounds like. Like that's ridiculous,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's what
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I made serious games well, and it goes a bit back to what I said before. Like, people have to be engaged within the first 5 minutes, otherwise they will just play another game. And I think with a lot of serious games, people then test it again, and then they test like, do people learn something from this? Yes. Do you like the game? People will say yes, but in what context? The context is often that people. I made a lot of serious games for training personnel
Right.
stuff, and like,
Yeah.
yeah, I like doing this better than doing my job because it's basically taking an additional break. So yeah, people enjoy it, so they will learn something. So in that sense, it works. That is fine. But if you will ask them, okay, play this serious game or play insert big AAA title, they will choose that. They will choose that entertainment product, and I think that's what we set out to do with this project. Is like, we want to make a game about a serious topic, but that's really an entertainment product. That's why it should not be free. It should be something that people pay money for, and that they want to pay money for it because they want to play this game and they want to have this experience. And I believe this is, like, there are some games out there that try to do this as well, but I think it should be more. If you look at the film industry space, that happens a lot more. There's of course like documentaries, and some people say, yeah, that's preaching to the converted. That's true, but there's also great entertainment products with some subtext or actually very outspoken political things. If you look at like a movie like Don't Look Up, there's no subtext there as well. It's also that's like very direct, and it's I don't know actually how successful that movie was, but it's a big AAA budget and movie as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we should be making that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the like one of the sort of like outside of games key successes. I think that I'm thinking the two key successes that I'm thinking of in sort of film and series is Adolescence and Star Wars Andor. And there are two versions of what you can do with this, right? Both of them are interesting for us for All Will Rise, I think, because they're both about sort of like the human scale, you know? They're about people and people's struggles and stuff, which is very relatable to what we're doing. But they're both interesting examples because Adolescence is very, textual, right? There's no subtext. It's just about the societal problem of misogyny and online manipulation and so on. and radicalization. And then you have Star Wars Andor, which is, of course, in a Star Wars setting, the most sort of commercial setting you could possibly think of. Next to it, together with Avengers or something like that. But with much more staying power, I would argue. And then you make a story about anti-imperialism in that, right? And then what I'm interested in is the question of I mean, it's much easier to track the impact of adolescence than to track the impact of Andor, right? Because adolescence is, it led to conversations in the British Parliament and in high schools and so on. And Andor is, because it's more metaphorical and more fictional in that sense, I think you have to work a bit more to find how that translates into real life change. And one person I know, Stephen Duncombe, that I've mentioned before this week, he would argue that you need to organize actual social movements around these things, right? So that's definitely something we've been discussing before as well about All Will Rise. Is can we sort of like build on people's interest in this game to get them connected to real social movements, and how do we do that without breaking the fictional and sort of like suspension of disbelief cohesion of this fictional setting, right? Because if there's too much real world sort of links and stuff coming into the game, it breaks the enjoyment sort of the game a little bit. So that's those are interesting conversations.
I think it's interesting for people to know, like, what we're creating this game, but we're not creating this game in a vacuum. We're actually talking to like impact investors as well. Like, can we find impact investors that would fund more of these type of games to get this side of gaming bigger, to make games more of a positive impact for change, and we. Like, for us, this is our first collaboration as a group as well. But the idea is that this sets a movement in motion of more of these games, and not that we are the only ones doing it. It's not what I want to say, but like, we want to be part of that, setting that movement in motion. So behind the scenes, we're not just making this game; we're doing a lot of other things as well to drive process. So if anybody's interested in talking about that, then hook us up.
Yeah, there's a lot of developers. There's a lot of developers now, indie devs, that are interested in entering the same kind of space of meaningful games that have a desire for societal impact, but from this very expressive, artistic, engagement first kind of place, right? Where it's about making a damn good game first that people love. It's exciting to see, right? But it's a hard space, because my friends at the Copernicus Institute who work in innovation studies talk about how creating a new market is one of the most difficult things that's there, right? And what I mean with a new market there is, this is obviously also why publishers and so on struggle with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
You need the souls likes, right? You need to create Demon Souls first. And one of the heads of Sony said famously about that game that it was a piece of trash, and that no one would buy it and no one would play it. And a super hard, difficult game like that. Once upon a time, there was just it wasn't really the culture and the market for it. It's seemingly, and then of course it exploded. And now, if you say a Souls-like, you're guaranteed to sell in a way, right? And something similar, I think, needs to happen with games that. It's the Disco Elysium likes, right? It's the Citizen Sleepers, it's and so on. But there's more steps to take there, because I think those games are still, how do we tie this sort of depth of character and world building and political analysis to action, right? And I think one of the most gratifying comments that we've had on All Will Rise, we've heard it from a few people, but there was one a person on Blue Sky called an Iteration who put it very nicely, who said this is like Disco Elysium, but the spectrum of possibilities is almost entirely the opposite, because in Disco Elysium you play a sort of a servant of the ailing governing class, right? He's a policeman and so on. And in All Will Rise, you play someone who's at the vanguard of change. And I think all of us, when we saw that comment, we were like, yes, this is exactly what we want. What we wanted. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was also like when we go a step back. Like that is one of the parts of the vision that we had for this game. Like it's Disco Elysium in terms of writing and politicalness, but then very positive
without being too utopian, right? It's still grappling with the realities of difficult change. But I remember when we were in our early, like when we had our very first little narrative demo, and that we took to Gamescom the first time, and I remember that you and I were in a pitch meeting with a publisher, and I said something like, this could be the next Disco Elysium, and I remember the publisher saying, well, but that's
what they all say.
And they said Disco Elysium is actually not a good example because it's such a fluke, right? It's such an unusual phenomenon. And I think only when we see Disco Elysium, but then also Citizen Sleeper, then also Norco, and you get like a genre almost, is when people start to trust it a bit more, I think.
Yeah, but that's in that sense. But I also feel. You see that this more people are saying this lately. It's not an innovative thought, but people want that novel experience as well. But it's really hard to predict beforehand if it's going to be a success or not. If you do something really new, then it's a way bigger risk, and that's very scary for publishers because they want certainty, and so they're not going to fund your game very early on when you just have a very wild idea. I think our pitch basically hasn't changed for this game, and also I think our vision for the game also really hasn't changed. But there's just so much more now.
We're proving the vision, right? And I think that makes a big difference. And it's a good lesson. And I think one of the big things that we've learned is that we wanted to focus much more on the depth of gameplay. That was also early feedback that we got, right? I mean, obviously that's an interesting question because this game very much started from an idea of representing a real world phenomenon in an exciting way, rather than starting with game mechanics, right? And so that sort of moved towards great game mechanics, which we have now. It was a bit of a journey, right? And not making it just like a narrative game or a visual novel or something, which we didn't want to make. And I don't think any of us are really interested in visual novels, so
Yeah. So I played through a week of the game again in the background, not paying too much attention maybe. So some of the conversation didn't go so well, but we haven't been able to now sort of tie Rishab to the river burning. Because of Rishab.
Pretty good, actually. I would say that's quite impressive.
That's quite good, actually.
Yes.
So it's not the strongest of links yet. Because there's still some cards in there that, like the port is mismanaged, is still a hearsay card. So in the next week we should start focusing on strengthening that claim. That's something we need to strengthen in development as well, that it's easier for people to see which missions will strengthen which arguments. So that's something we need to improve, so that for players it's easier to do this, because we know what we need to do to strengthen the port is mismanaged claim card, but from the gameplay it's really hard to figure that out still. So that's something we need to improve. But I think let's go into the last week of the demo. It's nice. We're going to maybe.
Yeah, you're making good progress.
Yeah, exactly. So like our case here is growing, and so is our game. So
it's interesting to it's interesting to think about pacing, right, for the weeks as well. That's been like a lot of design back and forth about how do you pace,
Yeah.
how much content is available to players, how many missions are there.
Yeah.
Do we want to not overwhelm people with like having a million conversations there all the time,
Yeah.
but of course you want the diversity as well. So
Oh, that's an interesting. So going back to production a bit, like one of the things now, so we get a lot of feedback, and we're going through all that feedback, and you really have to think how we're going to solve this, and is it something we will solve in content and balancing? So then it's not something we really need to work on now, but just like keep that in the back of our heads or in our backlog, in a sense, like we need to make sure we check later on that this is not a problem anymore. But other things are more systemically. So the example I just gave, like people don't really know very well yet what to work towards, like what their end game goal is. So that's why we put in the Monday meetings at some point, but then still they don't know which missions to track for that. So that's something we have to change systemically. But then other problem people have is that they feel they don't have a lot of deck control yet. Now we have in the game, but it's not very clear in the demo yet, but there's cards that allow you to, during gameplay, pick cards from your deck, and prune cards and stuff like that. So that's some more content. Like there's some systemic things we want to change there as well, but there's also a lot of content we still have to write and balance, and when do we introduce it, etc. We didn't want to go into the whole deck building because you already have to teach so much stuff to the player, but you can imagine that basically we now at the end of the demo we make you go against Rishab, the vice president of Resilience Corporation. Before, the idea is actually that you would would normally do a whole sort of deck building tutorial before that, where we really teach you how to choose your opening hand, to prune cards from your deck, where Shinto and Joy advise you on different strategies. And so there is where we would really normally introduce the deck building, but we felt, okay, this is actually a nice moment to end the game on a bit of a high note, and we don't want to put you through a whole tutorial and then end the game for you. So that's why we left it at that. But yeah. So yeah, I don't know if I have enough actually. I just went to Omanakuten, but I don't think I have enough new stuff here to actually convince him now. But let's see. Yeah. So some things are going to be in content, and then we'll have to solve that later. But then you have to make sure that you do solve that later, and don't forget about that. So.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about difficulty, Niels, for All Rise? Like, I know that we've talked about sort of maybe difficulty modes or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, any reflections on that? Yeah.
So, one of the things we want to do is that, and that's more for the narrative or more casual player or the non-gamer player we want to cater to. Like, in the end, we want the game, doesn't really matter what you do, you will get to the end of the game, and that will be spectacular. So we might even add autoplay card battles for people who really are not interested in the card, that just give me the narrative, okay, we'll autoplay the card battle almost for you. That's something we're playing with in our heads. So that if you just, what I'm doing now, like I'm just clicking cards and still you progress through the game. So that should be a possibility, but then you get to a sort of default ending with not a great case. I'm not going to spoil what's going to happen there, but but
it will still be interesting, though, right?
Yeah, it's still going to be interesting. And then there's of course the difficulty for people who actually do want to engage with the system, but don't understand yet what's happening, or they have the feeling that there's not enough control. That's actually the hardest part, because we have to make sure that we onboard them with these systems and teach them these systems in a drip feed way, with the offer them card battles that they're like, oh, I don't completely get it, oh, but now I do get it. And that can be sometimes very small things that you do. Like we noticed that a lot of people felt bad about not achieving the arguments with the first codified battle, but already by at the end saying, oh well, this was just one conversation, I will get back to codify. It's normal not to reach all my goals, because that's something we actually want. It is normal that within one conversation you don't always get all your goals. That already helped people, and I think what we need to make even more clear, that and that's something that people have to get used to, but maybe there's ways of how we can explain this, that it's not just a mechanically driven game, it's also a narratively driven game. There was one great example of that, a player that said, yeah, there was in the battle with Shabir at some point plays a card, my brother is dead, and stat-based, I want to play the denial card on that card to say, because I wanted to raise his spirits, and that the brother dies card drops Shabir's heart even further, and he wanted to get his heart up. But it felt like such a dick move to play the denial card on the brother's dead, and like we're like, yes, exactly. That is exactly what we want you to think about. So don't be an asshole. Like, would you? So it's mechanically, yes, you could, because if you, it's basically like if you, sometimes you can say to someone who's feeling a bit down, like, hey, come on, it's not that bad. Let's put it like that, and then someone might actually feel better because of that. But if you say that in a super inappropriate situation, like my brother just died, like, then they will think you're a total asshole. And we want you to be able to have that experience. So that's something we definitely don't want to get out of the game, but we do want to show you that is what the game is, to teach you those systems as well. So there's a lot of different layers we need to teach. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, that's our big challenge, right? Well, I think we're at the end of our hour.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for watching, and future people who are watching as well. Thanks Niels for diving into the sort of nitty gritty of producing this game, which I think is very educational for folks who are just getting started, and just people who want to know. Thanks everyone. We'll see you back on stream very soon. And well, kickstart us. Find us on Kickstarter, and support us. We're really hoping that we can make a great game.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.